Fortnite has officially reached a point that almost no game in history has ever achieved. It is no longer a battle royale, it is no longer just a live service game, it's become an entire gaming platform. But despite Fortnite being bigger than ever before, why does it feel like so many players are less excited about battle royale than they used to be? Today, I want to talk about where Fortnite currently stands, what I think Epic Games has done incredibly well, where I think they have gone wrong, and ultimately, where Fortnite should go next. Because believe it or not, I genuinely think Fortnite best years could still be ahead of it. But before we talk about the future, we need to first acknowledge how successful Fortnite has become. Let's think back to 2017. Nobody expected a free battle royale game from Epic Games to become one of the biggest entertainment brands on the planet. Now fast forward to today, Fortnite hosted concert featuring the likes of Travis Scott, Ariana Grande, Marshmello and many more. It's collaborated with Marvel, Star Wars, DC, Dragon Ball, Family Guy, Lego, WWE and many other brands. We've had over 40 seasons worth of content, multiple chapters, dozens of live events, millions of players, and the community is still incredibly active almost 10 years later. Very few games reach this level of success. Even fewer manage to stay relevant for this long. That's why I don't think it's controversial to say Fortnite has already won. From a business point of view, Epic Games has achieved something truly incredible. Ironically though, I think Fortnite's biggest strength has slowly become one of its biggest weaknesses. Because once you achieved almost everything, you also ask the question, what is next? How do you continue improving something that's already become one of the biggest games ever? Epic Games has spent years expanding Fortnite into something much bigger than Battle Royale. Today we have Lego Fortnite, we have Fortnite Festival, Rocket Racing, Creative, UEFN, and many other more, etc. And soon Fortnite creator tools are only going to become much more powerful. And honestly, it is actually quite amazing to see. But while Fortnite as a platform continues to grow, Battle Royale however doesn't feel like it's grown in quite the same way. Instead, it feels like it's slowly becoming just one part of a much more larger ecosystem. Is Battle Royale still the main attraction? Now don't get me wrong, Battle Royale is still Fortnite's biggest game mode. It still receives major seasonal updates, new mechanics, new weapons, new map changes, new collaborations. But compare Fortnite today to Fortnite like 5 or 6 years ago, back then everything revolved around Battle Royale. Every trailer, every teaser, every live event, everything led back to the island. Now, when you launch Fortnite, Battle Royale is literally just one option alongside dozens of others now. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think expanding Fortnite beyond Battle Royale was one of Epic's smartest business decisions. But the problem is, sometimes it feels like Battle Royale has lost a bit of identity in the process. And I think that's where a lot of the community's frustration comes from. This isn't a Fortnite is dying video. This is actually far from it. I think Fortnite is healthier than ever as a platform. But I also think Battle Royale, however, is facing an identity crisis. Not because it's a bad game, but because after almost a decade of constant updates, it's starting to feel like a completely different game compared to what millions of people originally fell in love with. So my question becomes, how do you keep Fortnite moving forward without losing what made it special in the first place? Because personally, I think Epic Games has the answer, but they just haven't realized it yet. So if Battle Royale has an identity problem, what actually caused it? Personally, I don't think there was one update that suddenly ruined Fortnite. There wasn't one season where everything just fell apart overnight. Instead, I think it happened gradually. Season after season, chapter after chapter, Epic Games kept doing exactly what live service games are supposed to do. Adding more content, adding more mechanics, adding more movement, adding more weapons, more bosses, more items, more ways to play, and so on. At first, that was pretty exciting. Every new season literally felt so fresh. There was always something new to learn every single season. But after nearly 10 years of constant updates, all of those additions have started stacking on top of each other. And eventually, the game begins to feel bloated. Think about when someone is downloading Fortnite for the very first time today. Within just a few games, they are already introduced to stuff like sprinting, sliding, mantling, wall kicks, weapon mods, mythics, medallions, bosses, NPCs, vehicles, build mode, zero build, ranked, and many other seasonal mechanics. Now let's just compare that to chapter 1. You landed, you found some loot, you collected shields, you build a couple few builds, and you try to survive. That simplicity wasn't a weakness, it was one of Fortnite's biggest strengths. Almost anyone could understand the game within a few matches. It was very easy to learn, but it was also very difficult to master. That's a huge reason why Fortnite exploded in popularity. Now let's talk about Fortnite's most iconic feature, building. At one point, building is what separated Fortnite from every other battle royale game on the market. It was very creative, it was very unique, and it created moments that no other game could ever replicate. But over the time, players become better, much better. What started as building simple forts eventually turned into players placing hundreds of builds and edits within seconds. Now don't get me wrong, there's an incredible amount of skill involved. The best players in the world are generally impressive to watch, I won't even lie about that. But there's also a downside. For newer or more casual players like me, build mode has become incredibly intimidating, when the player with the fastest edits usually comes out on top. That's not necessarily bad, it's just very different from the Fortnite that millions of people originally fell in love with. Epic Games clearly recognized this problem, and to their credit, they tried solving it. First, they introduced AI bots. The idea was simple. Give newer players easier fights so they can learn the game without constantly getting eliminated. It sounds like a great solution, but in reality, bots often make victories feel less rewarding. Winning a fight against an AI player just doesn't create the same excitement as outplaying a real opponent. Then came Zero Build, and honestly I think Zero Build was one of the smartest additions Epic has ever made. It brought back millions of players back, it gave casual players who doesn't want to do crazy builds and edits, give another option for them to play the game, and it proved there was still a huge audience for Fortnite, but it also highlighted another problem. And that problem is Fortnite's identity crisis. Because without building, Fortnite doesn't really feel like Fortnite anymore. I mean sure, it's still fun, but remove building and suddenly Fortnite starts feeling much closer to every other shooter game on the market. Building has always been Fortnite's identity. The challenge isn't removing it, the challenge is making it enjoyable again for everyone. Because right now, you almost got two completely different communities. You got a community that only want to play build, and you got the other community that only wants to play zero build. Both love Fortnite, but two completely different reasons. So my question becomes, is there a way to bring the two experiences closer together again? Because personally, I think there is, and surprisingly, I don't think it starts with another new season. I think it starts with something much bigger. A reboot. Now, before anyone hears the word reboot and starts thinking I'm on about wanting to have chapter 1 again, that is not what I mean. I don't want Epic Games to simply rewind the clock back to 2018 times again, because we have already experienced that through Fortnite OG. And while it was amazing to revisit the memories, eventually the nostalgia does wear off. Instead, I think Fortnite needs something much more bigger. A true fresh start. Not a remake, not a rerun, a brand new beginning. Let's say for example, imagine launching into a completely new chapter 1. A brand new island, completely original location, a fresh storyline, new weapons, new mechanics, but built around the same philosophy that made Fortnite so successful in the first place. Simple to understand, easy to jump into, but difficult to master. One of the biggest lessons Epic could take away from the last 10 years is that bigger doesn't always mean better. Modern Fortnite has hundreds of weapons, items, mechanics, and systems. But I think back during the early days, the weapon pool was tiny compared to today. There were fewer locations, fewer mechanics, fewer distractions, yet somehow, every single match just felt exciting. Why? Because every weapon mattered, every chest mattered, every fight mattered. When the loot pool is smaller, every item has an identity. When the map isn't overloaded with points of interest, every location becomes memorable. Tilted Towers wasn't iconic because it had like 5 bosses or 10 vaults. It was iconic because of the players, the stories, the chaos, the clips from other streamers. Sometimes simplicity creates the better memories than complexity ever can. Now, I'm not saying Epic should remove every modern feature. Far from it. There are plenty of additions that have improved Fortnite. Sprinting does feel great. Sliding adds movement without changing the core gameplay too much. Mantling is so useful. Although I do think it could be adjusted so that building remains the quickest and smartest way to gain hype during fights. The goal isn't to make Fortnite feel old again. The goal is to make it feel focused again. Every mechanic should have a purpose, every weapon deserves its place in the loot pool, and every season should be built on a strong foundation instead of constantly trying to reinvent the game. The other change I'll seriously consider is separating Battle Royale from everything else. Now hear me out. I'm not saying remove LEGO Fortnite or Festival or Creative, UEFN, etc, etc, etc. I actually think those experiences are fantastic. In fact, they are a huge reason why Fortnite has remained relevant for so long. But Battle Royale shouldn't have to compete with every single time you launch the game. Imagine opening Fortnite and being greeted with one clean menu. Battle Royale, Ranked, Reload, Team Rumble, Limited Time Modes. That is it. No endless rows of random experience. No clutter. Just Fortnite Battle Royale. Meanwhile, everything built within UEFN could continue growing as its own creator platform. That gives creator more freedom, it gives Battle Royale its identity back, and players immediately know where to go depending on what they are looking for. And overall, it would literally be a win-win situation for everybody. At the end of the day, I don't think Fortnite has a popularity problem. I don't think it has a player count problem. And I definitely don't think it's a dead game. If anything, Fortnite has become one of the biggest success stories in gaming history. The real question isn't whether Fortnite can survive for another 10 years. It's whether Battle Royale can continue feeling fresh for another 10 years. Because personally, I think it can. But only if Epic isn't afraid to reset, simplify, and focus on what made Fortnite special in the first place. Not because the old days were perfect, but because great games know when to evolve. And they also know when it's time to start again. Now, I'd love to hear your opinions in the comment section down below. If Epic Games gave you the complete control over Fortnite tomorrow, what is the very first thing you'd change? Would you reboot Battle Royale? Would you keep the game exactly how it is? Or do you have a completely different vision for Fortnite's future? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'll generally love to read some of your guys' ideas. And so if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to press a like and subscribe if you're new here. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.